Since time began, man has revelled in tales of mystery and the unknown, and the first unspeakable gropings of science have for centuries exerted a hideous fascination. Experiments only guessed at in their enormity, carried out under the raven cloak of night. The grim laboratory, workshop of the powers of darkness, with all the grotesque geography of the macabre, and all the familiar landscapes of horror. And nowhere more familiar than in the story of Frankenstein, now being brought to the screen yet again at Elstree Studios. This is in fact the 7th Frankenstein film to be made here, and Hammer Films seem all set for another big success. As films go, they're surprisingly cheap to make, a mere £250,000. But each time, the audiences and the profits more than justify what is becoming an almost annual exhumation. In this case, it's the local gravedigger and body snatcher, Dennis Price, selling his wares to Baron Frankenstein.
Action.
In here.
My goodness me.
Sit down on that bench over there, will you?
Sorry. He gave me a bit of a shock. When else you dig him up?
Fetch from that jar over there, will you? Quickly, man.
You cut yourself, have you?
Piece of broken glass.
Yes. Yes, I can see. Sticking out there in the front.
Where?
Oh, right there. Yes, it won't make any difference, though, will it?
I hope not. I'll have to take it out, though.
No harm done, then. Now, if you'd like to settle up, I'll be on my way.
Well, before you go...
Presiding over this year's rites, a new actor playing Frankenstein, Ralph Bates, who takes over from the man who played Frankenstein a record 6 times, Peter Cushing. He sees the character as the first transplant surgeon of them all.
In the early days, after I go back 16 years, everything that Frankenstein did was impossible. So therefore he was creating things that couldn't be created by man. But today, now that this dear fellow has taken over, these things can be done. Therefore I think perhaps the audience's interest is, in the old days they'd like to see what couldn't be done. Now they like to see what can be done being done, but by an actor playing Frankenstein. There was a brilliantly clever young man who, despite himself, had to go ahead with what he felt he could do. Rather like Dr. Knox, you know, with Birkenhead and getting the cadavers to help mankind over operations. And one felt that here was this chap who, despite himself, had to go on with this incredible thing he felt he could do. That was to make a human being out of parts.
In this case, he's former weightlifting champion Dave Prowse, weighing into the makeup room this morning at a terrifying 19 stones. And it takes 2 hours and all the ingenuity of the makeup artist before this gentle giant joins his distinguished predecessors, Lon Chaney and Boris Karloff, as the unfortunate result of pioneer transplant techniques.
I don't think there's ever really been a moral in any of the pictures, except that in all of them, he never gets, the baddie never gets away with it. See, he's never the baddie, Frankenstein's never the baddie. It's his poor old monster whom he creates is the baddie. And if a baddie goes clumping around the countryside killing children and throwing them up in trees and biting women, and things, yeah. He has to meet, because of the Hayes office, he has to meet his ends, you know, at the end of the picture.
Believe in it all, to act it convincingly, Ralph?
Oh, utterly, yes.
Well said.
Yes. It's, I think the nearest thing to it, actually, and I mean this in the best possible way, is like playing pantomime. That within that convention of pantomime, you've got to believe it, otherwise, because the kids are the first one to say, you know,
yes.
They do, they're the quickest. And it's exactly the same thing with this. I mean, this is fantasy, but it has to be played with conviction, otherwise...
You must get the audience to believe what you're doing, because if you don't believe it yourself, they never will.
As the dry ice keeps the cauldrons bubbling, Frankenstein has certainly found the quality he could never give his monsters, immortality. on celluloid at least. Meanwhile, the victims must keep dying. This time it's the turn of Dennis Price, the body snatcher, to meet his doom in the inevitable vat of acid.
Can't see anything.